for the Republican National Convention. We're nearing the end of the convention here. It's Thursday afternoon, and I'm so pleased, though, to be joined by Congressman Jodey Arrington of Texas. Congressman, thank you so much for taking the time to talk today. Now, you serve as chairman of the House Budget Committee, and I'm really excited to get into this issue of where do we stand as a nation financially. We are in hot water. We're in $34 trillion is our national debt. And it's an issue that both Republicans and Democrats talk about. You know, the national debt's a problem. But then when push comes to shove, it seems like nothing ever really gets done on the national debt. What's the plan? Let's say that after November, come January, we have a president who's a Republican, if Trump is elected. Let's say that Republicans are able to maintain control of the House, and if the Senate is taken back by Republicans, what's the plan to address the national debt?
Well, you're right. There hasn't been much follow-through on either side. There's been a lot of rhetoric, a lot of hollow promises, a lot of posturing so that they can gain support from concerned Americans and families. People who have children and grandchildren who know intuitively that the path that we're on is completely unsustainable. It's not just the 35 trillion nominal metric, it's the fact that as a percentage of our total economic output, we are at 120+% debt to GDP, which makes our indebtedness the highest in history, surpassing World War II, and we're not at war. I mean, we're in relative peace and prosperity, and it's just going to get worse. So our fiscal health is in rapid decline in this country. If we don't change course, we will not only jeopardize our economy, our security, but our leadership in the world and our children's future in this country. We will rob them of this land of opportunity and of their freedom if we can't borrow to pay for what amounts this year to $2 trillion in an annual deficit. And it's costing us now almost $1 trillion just to service the debt. So our interest payments on the national debt have surpassed all of national defense spending and now all of Medicare spending. It's squeezing out private investment, which hurts the economy. It's squeezing out our ability to fund our national priorities, namely defense, which is down below 3% GDP for the first time in decades, pre-World War II. So I'm very concerned. I think this is my generation's World War III, essentially. I think the battle between the great adversarial powers, namely China, is really an economic battle. And I think we better be quick to put this nation on a sustainable path, a path to balancing our budget, living within our means, and getting our fiscal house in order. We have a plan. It's based, the title is based on James Madison's warning, a public debt is a public curse and the worst of its kind in a Republican form of government. But even George Washington in his farewell address said the same thing. He said, look, you're going to have to take on debt in times of national emergency and crises, but then you got to be quick to shed it. And he said, do not put on a debt burden on the generation, the next generation of Americans, such that you aren't willing to bear. And we're doing that. And the $35 trillion is a deferred tax on generations of Americans into the future, and it's immoral. And we've got to start reining that in. We've got to start growing this economy, which is part of the equation. We have a 10-year path to balance. We've got a blueprint for doing it. And I'm excited about President Trump because most of all, we know how to do this generally, probably both sides as well, but we haven't had the collective political courage to execute on it. I don't know a politician in my lifetime that's had more courage to do the right things than President Trump. So I'm excited about turning the tide there, putting our nation and our children's future on the right fiscal track.
Yeah. Well, just along those lines, when you think about the issue of Social Security, and that's obviously not popular to talk about having to cut Social Security benefits, but if something doesn't change, we're just a handful of years away from having to make that choice of, okay, Do we start hacking away at Social Security benefits, or do we start ramping up and raising taxes further? These are hard choices that have to be made.
They're very difficult, but here's a worse scenario than just finding a path of pay-fors and programmatic reforms. And there are a lot of common sense reforms that would make that program run in a more cost-effective way. Believe it or not, the federal government's not the most efficient manager of resources and of these programs. So there are tremendous opportunities there to get it right and make it not just to save it from insolvency, but make it sustainable into the future. The problem is it becomes so politicized. But if we do nothing, Virginia, this Social Security safety net that our seniors are depending on will take an automatic 23% cut in less than a decade. So inaction equals automatic cut. We're at a time in the life of this country where we need courageous leadership like President Trump on a lot of issues, not the least of which is this one. I think on Social Security and Medicare, you're going to need a bipartisan consensus like we saw the last time it was addressed when Ronald Reagan worked with Tip O'Neill and struck a deal to save this important program and to make it better. And there are opportunities to do that now. We just have to have the right leadership. Certainly that's a priority for me. And it goes beyond Social Security. It goes into broader health care and welfare issues.
Yep.
80% of our budget is on auto spend. When we talk about government
nuts.
shutdowns and we talk about funding the government, it's generally 20% of the budget that's discretionary. It's basically defense and non-defense government operations. But ever since 1965, we've seen an explosion in this auto spend, and it is driving the debt along with interest payments, which are out of control.
Yeah.
But the wheels are coming off, and if we don't address this, and if we don't do it in a way that puts our country before our party and our seniors' interests before our own political, we're in trouble. We're in big trouble, and everybody will feel the pain of it.
Well, and I think they are in so many ways. I mean, we look at inflation, we look at the cost of goods. Is it possible for the cost of goods to go down, or do you think that it can be tricky when things have gone up for that to then be lowered? Are the prices that we have right now, are those here to stay, or is there real hope that we could see the cost of living come down a little bit?
Well, I think the profligate spending over years, and while I think the gold prize goes to my Democrat colleagues, I would say Republicans shouldn't get a pass on it either. I think Republicans have made their fair share of contributions by waiving pay-fors for expanded programs. We've had spending caps that we've also waived to fund the military. So everybody's culpable here. But, yeah, I think the way to address inflation, and I know that's a plank in the platform, and I know our president, President Trump, our nominee, is very concerned about the pocketbook issues that are affecting working families. The first thing you have to do is to reverse the spending spree we've seen under this president. It's been a record amount of deficit spending, adding to the national debt like we've never experienced. So he's flooded the market with federal monies that have overstimulated demand, and at the same time, he's squeezed supply by taxing and regulating our job creators and those who are supplying products and services. It's the worst of the perfect storm for record inflation. So yes, we can bring it down. I think a lot of damage has been done by the Federal Reserve by printing money like there's no tomorrow. I think there's been a tremendous amount of fiscal recklessness throughout the decades in recent history. But if we bring down that spending, if we grow the economy, if we get back to pro-growth policies like deregulating the administrative state, for heaven's sakes, and we unleash American producers and manufacturers, we can get there. And we've been there before. And we'll get there again, but we have to have the right leadership and the right policies. And we have to make this unbridled, profligate, bankrupting spending a priority for this country and for our party. And I have no question in my mind that President Trump will do that in his second term.
Well, Congressman, I certainly appreciate your time here at the Republican National Convention. I hope you enjoy your evening. I know many of us will be watching the president speak from the main stage tonight. So thank you for your leadership on tackling this issue that is truly affecting every American as we look at the national debt and out-of-control spending out of Washington, D.C., and hope for a better future.
Amen. Well, amen to that. And just pray for the country and pray that as we restore freedom back to this, to we the people, and the power back to we the people, we also reverse the curse that is looming large over our children's future, which is this national debt that is absolutely unsustainable. Thanks for letting me have voice with your viewers and your listeners, and God bless America.
Thank you so much, Congressman.